Thank you for joining us today for Welcoming Wellness. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon here, and I'm really thankful that you decided to come and spend a little time with us. Welcoming Wellness is a mental health initiative of White Plains United Methodist Church in Cary. Our goals are to provide education and resources to caregivers, friends, and family members of people who are suffering with mental health conditions. We also strive to create a community of care where everyone feels free to speak up and ask for help when they need it. Today, we welcome our in-person audience and our Zoom audience as well. And we're going to view a video entitled Moving America's Soul on Suicide. This video is shown with permission and was produced by 5 Lanes, One Road to Recovery and copyrighted in 2023 by Integrated Health Resources, LLC. Now, this is a very moving video of 5 suicide attempt survivors. There's nothing graphic or gruesome about it, so I want you to know that. I've viewed it twice and I found it very uplifting. It's a way to see into the mind of people who deal with these issues on a daily basis. Please be aware that this video talks about very sensitive things. Suicide is a very sensitive subject, and it's not for everyone. You know, we realize that talking about suicide can be a difficult situation. I was going to give you out some statistics on suicide, but you know, they're different. Every organization that puts them out, you know, a little different. But there was one that really struck me. The World Health Organization says that, listen to this number, 727,000 people commit suicide annually. What it tells me is you may think you don't know anyone that has suicidal ideations or has had a plan for suicide, but my bet is you do. You may not know that you know because of the stigma involved. But just remember that number. That's almost 750,000 people annually. So sit back and watch and listen and learn and see how you can help. We are going to present Moving America's Soul on Suicide.
I mean, the myths about suicide they are pretty numerous, and they're hard to counter because they're entrenched. Suicide is scary and fearsome. It's a dismal topic, and I think that's only natural insofar as it means death and killing both in one act. It scares people. I feel like if we can explain this and understand it deeply and fully, that'll put light on it. And if you put light on things, stigma starts to go away naturally. It's a real tragedy that we've got to do better at preventing, and that we've got some hope in doing that. But we've got a lot of work to do too.
You know, growing up as a kid in Indiana, most young boys in some way dreamed of basketball. You know, when I was a senior and I got told by the coach, you're going to be captain of the basketball team, man, you were on cloud nine. Back then, that was when Indiana was one class of basketball. We'd have 3,000-4,000 people at a basketball game. You'd have 8,000-10,000 people at sectionals. Well, you're 17, 18 years old, and you're the one going out to center court. It just makes you feel like this. It makes you feel like you can do anything. Now, unfortunately for me, I was a 6'3" forward. And there's not a lot of 6'3" forwards in college basketball. So one of my first disappointments in life was when the only place that wanted me to play were, really small schools or junior colleges or whatnot. And I ended my career. But I still knew what it felt like to be on top, and I wanted to keep that going. I think that's one reason joining the Marine Corps was so attractive to me. I saw it as a way to continue that progression up the ladder of being on top, of being tough. Now, the funny thing is, until I got to Vanderbilt, I thought I knew what tough was. I didn't really know what tough was. And one day, I was walking down my freshman dorm, and there was this recruiting poster from the Marine Corps. And it was a picture of a Marine standing next to an F-18. And in that moment, it hit me. What could be cooler? What could be tougher than to be the person in that picture? And if I was as tough as I thought I was, that's what I would go do. So I grabbed it off the wall. I didn't want anyone else to see it, steal the spot. That's how I was thinking. Went down to the recruiter, walked into his office. I had that poster with me. I said, I want to be this. To be a pilot, you had to be an officer. So I had to finish college. It's not like you can just say, I want to do that, and they let you. So in the Marine Corps, they have what's called Officers Candidate School in the summers while you're in college. And very early on, they make you aware of this award you can get at the end of this 6-month school. And it's kind of like, like the physical fitness toughest guy award. Everybody kind of, the nickname everybody had for it was like the Iron Man award, kind of like the toughest person there. So, I was by no means the fastest dude or the strongest, but for some reason, I wanted to be known as the toughest. And so when everybody else would hit the rack, go to sleep, I'd get up in the middle of the night, I'd do push-ups, sit-ups. A couple of times I'd sneak out, run if we had a test coming up. By the end of that 6 months, they told me at the time I was the first officer to go through that in almost 2 years that had a perfect score on everything. Everything you could had a top score. There was someone faster than me. There was someone stronger than me. But I won. Most people that have flown will tell you that the first time you solo is just an amazing experience. And you're in there for the first time and you're nervous. You're a little scared. I'm going to take off, but am I going to get it back on the ground? And you get up there, and it's not what you expect because, at that point, you don't really know anything. But you're flying through the air. And to me, at least, more than anything, is other than the drone of the engine, it's how quiet it is and how peaceful it is. And you see the clouds and you see birds flying by and you're by yourself and it's just you and you're totally in control and the earth is below you and there's like a peace that comes to it. Now, I didn't feel it at the time, but I think there's also a danger that comes to it, and it was with me, was that you really do feel like I'm in control. I am master of the universe. It was just a routine training mission, and our jet caught fire, Oceana, Virginia. Had to eject right at the end of the runway. Don't even remember a lot of it. Most of it, people told me after the fact. 1 minute, I'm this big, bad, toughest guy in the room. Next minute, I'm in a hospital. Didn't seem real. I was too tough for that. At one point, they told me not to walk around, and I started walking around, and they came in with like this look of fear in their face. What are you doing? Your back is broke. Oh, that's why my back hurts so much. Then I find out my instructor had been killed, and it was weird. I didn't act like I thought I would. I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but it was like in your head, well, they told you people were going to die. What did you think? This identity that I had cultivated over my whole life of being tough. If you're just tough enough, if you just suck it up, you're going to be okay. People that get broke are weak. That's what happens to other people. But now, I'm away from Marines. I'm in this hospital. I'm depressed. I'm worrying about, am I really that tough? I look at those pill bottles piling up on my bedside table and I go, well, who would take those? A loser would take those. And if I didn't have a doctor's appointment, my normal day would be I would get up, I'd go to this corner drugstore where I got beef jerky and Mountain Dew, which I kind of subsisted off of. I'd come home, I'd take my pill cocktail, made me feel like I was floating in bed all day. I'd float in bed all day, and at night, I'd do one of two things. I'd either put a gun in my head, or I'd go out partying, making things worse. And the most unbearable part of it was time. So many times I would be lying there in bed and my head would feel like it was gonna explode with just pain and stress and anxiety and all the mistakes I'd made in life and all the bad things would just go over and over and over in my head. And I'd feel like I'd been lying in that bed for hours. And I look over at the clock and like 5 minutes had gone by. And in that moment, I would literally say to myself, I can't do this. If that's 5 minutes, I can't do another night. I can't do another day. And then compounding that, the pain I was in from my back, the guilt I felt, the shame I felt. Who am I gonna be when I'm not a Marine anymore? And then you question everything. Am I as tough as I thought I was? I guess I wasn't really tough. I guess it was just all an illusion. I guess it was just all in my head. Heck, I can remember having moments I think it didn't happen. I didn't live. My whole life wasn't real. And then I got a call one day, and it was this new psychiatrist at the hospital. And she wanted to meet with me. And I walk in. I wasn't very happy about being in an Air Force base, being a young Marine. Thank you, Air Force, by the way. You saved my life. But this is how I felt at the time. She seemed really old, which now seems really young. If you're this old, you're a puppy, trust me. But she was probably 35, which to me in my 20s seemed like really old. But she saved my life. All my Marine friends were telling me to suck it up, it'll be okay. And she spent a lot of time just wanting to know who I was. Who was that little boy? Who was that guy in high school? Who was this kid that wanted to be a Marine? And as I felt known by her, that distance between us evaporated.
Well, anger is a response to another deeper situation going on, like hurt or wounds, but it usually has that component of power and control in it.
Yeah.
It helps you feel powerful in the moment.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm good at fighting. Not saying it's always a good thing, but, I just think I am. And that's why, again, but it means something different for me. It doesn't mean, I want to just fight everybody or I want to have a, bad behavior. To me, fighting is staying alive. When I was a little girl, I had dreams of being a Broadway singer. Back in the day, my mama used to say, you don't even know your ABCs, but you know Al Green. But that's the kind of family I had. We lived in this amazing little neighborhood. We were poor. We know it because we had an abundance of love and of entertainment. And so I just had this amazing, childhood, and I was happy and I was laughing and I was vibrant. And then I was molested, and I remember turning into this beast. And I remember that little girl with the big forehead, with the big tooth, who wanted to entertain people. She died, and nobody grieved for her. Nobody said nothing. And that was hard. By the time I was 10, I was sexually active on my own. 12 was the first time that I tried to kill myself. And so I remember getting out the hospital in New Orleans and I came home. Nobody never said anything in my family. Nobody asked Tanja, why did you do it? They just told me, you need to go to church and you need to trust God more. I'm like, okay. I started, acting out more. I started getting kicked out of school more. I never forget the first time that I was raped. It was very violent, and it was with a person that I wouldn't have expected it to be by. That's when it really got bad. The behavior worsened because I went from doing marijuana, and marijuana, became pills. I remember my mom said that when I tried to kill myself, that was the first time she seen my dad cry. And you had to know my dad. My dad was a strong man. He was very sure of himself. He was like a drill sergeant. He figured he had to train me to be stronger. I think he saw suicide as, my daughter being weak. And there's no way my daughter can be weak. The military was some of my best times because it gave me a sense of purpose. I love camaraderie, I love teamwork. And so, like I said, I was trained to fight while wounded by my dad. And then in the military, they teach you, bombs bursting in air, you get shot, you still better, pick up your weapon and keep it moving and aim back at the enemy. But here's the deal, I was always fighting the enemy and I didn't know what it was. I finally got in a good space. I did a lot of rehabilitation. I got off the drugs, and that's when I met this guy, Darren, who was going in these underserved communities every Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. He would go out and he would give food to the homeless. He was going into prisons. He was going to the Salvation Army, just, encouraging men and things like that. And I'm like, I want to do what he's doing. And so when I told him, I'm like, look, I want to start a program on Friday nights to help people with addiction. And he was just like, okay. And so we started in my grandmother's house. Then it moved to a friend of mine's house who was a social worker. And then it moved into a church. And before you knew it, it just became something huge. So one day we're doing all this amazing work, me and Darren, and I get a call and I don't answer back because it was a 202 number. And then 2 days they kept calling. And so then on the third day they called the church we were at and they were like, hey, we're looking for Tanja. And so they was like, Tanja, the White House is calling you. President George W. Bush would like you to be his guest at the State of the Union address.
Our fourth goal is to apply the compassion of America to the deepest problems of America. For so many in our country, the homeless and the fatherless, the addicted, the need is great. Yet there's power, wonder-working power, in the goodness and idealism and faith of the American people. Addiction crowds out friendship, ambition, moral conviction, and reduces all the richness of life to a single destructive desire. Yet for those already addicted, the fight against drugs is a fight for their own lives. Too many Americans in search of treatment cannot get it. Our nation is blessed with recovery programs that do amazing work. One of them is found at the Healing Place Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. A man in the program said, God does miracles in people's lives, and you never think it could be you. Tonight, let us bring to all Americans who struggle with drug addiction this message of hope. The miracle of recovery is possible, and it could be you.
I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It is. I think it's going to be interesting for people to go, so wow, you went through all that and you never said nothing. And you're supposed to be so strong and, you were doing so much. I mean, I'm not really harping on it, but I think that, wait a minute, how is it that, you have all this faith, you have all this stuff going for you, and you still have suicide ideations? When me and Darren first got married, we had to have extensive counseling because of my background. Like one of the questions was, so if you're walking in the mall and you see a guy she turned a trick with, how you gonna feel about that, Tanja? Darren, what you gonna feel about that? So it was stuff like that most married people don't talk about that we had to talk about. And I remember us having a fallout on the phone, and I'm thinking like, wow, I failed at being a wife. And so before you know it, I started, journaling. And then journaling started into writing. And before you know it, I was, full-fledged suicide thoughts. And as I'm writing, I begin to start planning. And basically, I just wanted my family to know that, look, this is my decision. This is my life. It's my decision. You couldn't love me enough. I know y'all love me, but I'm done. I'm tired. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired. And so I remember it clearly. After I wrote the letter, I went and got my medications, and I got in my car, and I'm just like, okay, I just need to find a space that somebody can find me pretty quickly. I reached out to my cousin who had PTSD, and he had just finished his time as being a Marine, and I'm like, I just need him to tell everybody, look, I'm good. And for some reason, I thought that he would understand. So I called him. I'm like, look, cuz, I'm done. I'm tired. You know what I've been through with, the things Darren and I, and I'm just done. I love y'all, but I don't need nobody to be hurt by this. And so I remember him just going, cuz, what are you talking about? And no, cuz, and I remember him just hanging up the phone. And so he tried to call me back. I wouldn't answer. He tried to call me back again, and then my nephew and nieces start calling me, and I did not answer. And so I'm riding around trying to find a park, and then I get a phone call from a friend of mine, Sharon. And the reason why I answered her phone call, because a friend of hers had just died, her best friend. And I remember when Ronnie died, I didn't go to the funeral because I was sad. I wasn't sad that Ronnie died. I was sad that Ronnie wanted to live and she died. I don't want to live, and I'm still alive. And for some reason, I had a come to myself moment, and I went back to the house. And as soon as I went back to the house, I turned the corner, and there was 2 police cars. So I'm like, you know what? I do this for a living. I got it. I got this. And so I said, look, me and my husband just having a bad time. We're just going through some challenges. And I said, look, I was just with the sheriff today. I was with such and such, and I started rolling down names. And he's like, I know you. I've seen you on TV. He's like, wait a minute, you do stuff with law enforcement. I'm like, yeah, that's me. So I'm like, I know I'm good now. So I just started talking to him. And then he's like, you know what, Miss Miles, wait a minute. So he went to the car and made a call. And then he came back and he said, I'm sorry, there are a lot of people concerned about you, even the sheriff. You need to go to the hospital. I got locked up for like 7 to 8 days. And I remember the look, some of my friends and family came to visit me, and I remember the look on their face. They were horrified. I never want to see that look on anybody again. And then I realized that, this pain that I'm feeling, if I do this, the pain don't leave, it just transfers to them. So I ended up going to therapy, which was one of the best decisions I ever made. And so it's been 5 years that I have not had a suicide ideation or any thoughts of suicide. And people ask me, so what do you contribute that to? Besides my faith, I contributed to being in therapy. Therapy ain't scary, because it's my hour. I do all this amazing stuff for everybody else, which I'm grateful to do it, but it's my hour. And I don't have to feel selfish about having an hour for myself. I didn't know what was going on with me. My family didn't know. That's not why they didn't know what to do. I didn't know what trauma was. And the sad thing is, I've worked with people with addiction, most of my, adult life, having a treatment facility, working around psychiatrists and doctors and therapists, and just never put 2 and 2 together that, it was trauma. And when there was a name put to the pain, then I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. I'm wounded, but there's hope. And there's a process to this pain. There's a process through getting out of this trauma. And so that's why it clicked for me so fast, because I was like, oh, now I get it. That's why I act like that. I wasn't a bad person. I wasn't an evil person. I was wounded. I was trying to fight for my life.
The idea behind my theory of suicidal behavior, given how fearsome death is, any death really, but certainly self-caused death, I just think it therefore stands to reason that it requires a facing of that fear. To do that, you have to have a special quality, and we've called that quality the capacity for suicide. It's roughly a 3-factor model. 2 of the factors explain why people desire to die in the first place. Perceived burdensomeness. I feel like I'm a burden, and therefore my death will be worth more than my life to other people. That's it in a nutshell. Thwarted belongingness is really just loneliness or alienation. You feel both those things simultaneously, and you're hopeless about that state of affairs ever changing. To the model, that's what produces suicidal desire. But lots of people want to die by suicide. In fact, a lot of people desperately want to. That doesn't mean they will, because when it comes to actual prospect, it's very difficult and hard and painful and fearsome. You need a third variable, the wherewithal variable, the capacity variable to facilitate the desire. And if you don't have it, you're not going to be able to do it, even if you really desire it. So that's that's what I meant by 3 factors. It's 3 factors coming together, and when they do in the same person, that's what produces these catastrophic deaths. There's a theme that runs throughout a lot of philosophy, moral ethics over the course of actually millennia. Freud, for instance, it was love and work. Just feeling like you matter, like you can affect things in the world around you and the others, that you feel like you're connected socially, that you belong. Those 2 pillars make a lot of sense if you think about it ancestrally. You needed to pull your own weight. You need to have some efficacy, to live in hard times. But we're social creatures, and we couldn't survive ancestrally without each other. That's incidentally why we're so sensitive to feeling left out and feeling like we don't belong. In the ancestral environment, if that happened to you, it was death. It meant death.
As early as age 5 years old, things were different with me. Something was going on the inside of me, something was going on in my head, but I just couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. I found out early in life that I was adopted, and that was a big trigger for me growing up. It was hard for me to really identify why. How could somebody give birth to me, look at me, and think that I wasn't good enough? I knew that I didn't look like my mom. I knew I didn't look like my dad. I didn't look like my older sisters. I didn't look like my grandfather. I didn't look like anybody in my family. I was always an outsider. I always felt like I was the loner of the crew. It was, difficult growing up, struggling with that. 12 and a half, going on 13 is when my parents would split and later on divorce. I went from an elementary where I could run around. If I wanted to cry, I probably could, and it would have been okay, to a junior high where you had to worry about how you looked. You had to worry about keeping in your emotions. You had to worry about being tough and being able to defend yourself. It was like I hated everything on life times 10, and I just wanted to die. And just the transitioning of having to pick a parent, going back from home to home and halfway living with my mom, halfway living with my dad. At 14, I was just overwhelmed. I met a girl in college while I was at City College, San Francisco, and here we are, 2 young people trying to mesh 2 things together, and we just tried to be in a relationship. But that problem is she had just as many problems as I did, and we argued a lot. On one particular argument, I couldn't control myself. I can't remember what was said. It's just me, my older sister, and my ex-girlfriend at the time. And we got into an argument. I got so mad that as you're going out the house, you got to walk through the kitchen. As you walk through the kitchen, the biggest knife in the house literally was laying on the counter for whatever reason. I grabbed that knife on my way out and I run out. Now my older sister, who's never seen me upset, I mean, you know, she's probably seen me cry a couple times here and there, but she's never seen me like this because I was a king of cool. Like, I was a king of always keeping my emotions together and keep my emotions in check because I never wanted anybody to question what was really wrong with me. She didn't know what I was gonna do. So she called the Oakland Police Department. Oakland Police Department come out in about 15 minutes. They find me around the corner from my house, and I was on these steps, and I had that knife, and it was, you know, at my throat. Now, for the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control. Now, it may not have been like a good control, but it was something about the control that I felt. It was something about being able to dictate the next couple of seconds, the next couple of minutes. Nobody was gonna be able to tell me what to do. I'm in control of what's going on. Growing up, I never wanted kids. I always felt like, you know, I was gonna be, you know, a horrible dad, or they were gonna grow up and feel like me. But when I used to watch on TV, when babies were being born, and you know, they come out the womb and the doctor clean the baby up and they hand the baby to the parents, it was that look of reassurance that the parents would give the baby. It was just like I yearned for that look, that moment. My daughter was supposed to be born July 23rd of 2004. That was her initial due date. She came April 6th. I remember getting a phone call from school in San Francisco and saying that we in labor. I had to drive from literally San Francisco to Berkeley, California, and I did that route in probably like 17 minutes, broke all these different laws because I was trying to get there for that moment. The first time I saw my daughter, she was in a glass incubator. Just looking down at this little baby that was mine, I felt like the biggest failure on earth because I felt like she was fighting for her life and I didn't know why. You know, who knew that, you know, I know she didn't have any platinum, you know, incubators. She didn't have, you know, some solid gold syringes or anything like that. So I was thinking at the time, 21 years old, you know, how much could this doctor bill be? I mean, you know, how much could it really accumulate to? When I got that doctor's bill and accumulate to $250,000, I knew that I was in trouble. On March 11, 2005, I woke up. It was like I felt every painful moment in my life that I didn't deal with, that I didn't address, that I didn't think mattered to me, I felt in one morning. I went to the Shell gas station. As soon as the pump clicked to say finish, my brain clicked and said Golden Gate Bridge. I had never been there. I never knew how I would have to jump off or what I would have to do. I just knew that I had to get to the bridge. I had to old-fashioned ask for direction, but I was hoping that whoever I asked for directions would look at me and want to know why I wanted to go there. She never even gave me eye contact. She looked straight forward from what she was doing and gave me directions. As I drove off from her, I felt like I was in control. I was done for the show. I was done talking. I was done negotiating. When I get to the bridge, I'm gonna park, I'm gonna get out the car, and I'm gonna jump over. That was the plan. But when I got out there, I just started pacing myself for about 5 to 10 minutes. I didn't realize in that moment, I was looking for one reason not to jump. I found a good spot. I looked over the railing, and in that water, I saw peace. I saw not having to be a burden. I saw not having to be a chameleon, not have to lie about who you are. So I take a couple steps back and I brace myself because I know I'm going to feel the water, and it's going to be over. And as I'm jumping over the railing, I hear a voice and I grab the railing. So now I'm angry. We going back and forth. I'm yelling at this voice to stay back because if he gets any closer, I'm just going to nudge back. And something on the inside of me says, why does he even care? And I know that he's pretty much over me now. And we go back and forth for the next 92 minutes and talked to my first responder, Officer Sergeant Briggs, openly about everything that happened in my life up until that point. And he just sat there and listened. It was like with every painful word that I was saying, it was like a weight was being lifted off of me. It had to be one particular thing to get me back over that railing. How I felt about being a failure as a father. When I talked about my daughter, it was a different emotion. He reminded me that, Kevin, you need to be here for her next birthday. I was looking for a reason to live, and he gave me one. I would have missed her first birthday. If I would have been successful, I would have missed out on all this. For the first time in my life, I'm openly talking about my problems in a room, full of 400 plus people. I could just feel the weights being lifted as I'm talking. I mean, I've never talked about things in my life, but as I'm talking, I can feel these weights being lifted. I got off that stage, and as I'm making my way back down to my table, it's a line that begins to form. And I remember it's this lady that's in line, kind of steps forward, and I could tell she's been crying the whole time, and she's in tears, and she said, I need you to listen to me. My son, Jacob, lost his battle 5 years ago. But you know what? I'm going to sleep tonight. And the only reason why I'm sleeping tonight is because now I can understand what Jacob was going through. In that moment, everything about me changed. I realized that I wasn't alone, and I realized that it was so much bigger than me, that the things that I've been through in my life were so much bigger than me. We have this idea of what we want people and society to see us as. And if we can't keep up with that image, we get all frantic. But the truth be told, we all are struggling with something. And I think that once we be honest, with each other and be real with the things that we struggle, and that's why I'm very real about what I deal with. I struggle every single day. I'm going to struggle every single day, but it doesn't and it will not define me.
The question for me has always been, how does this happen to humans? And it would be informative to know if it only happens in humans. Reading people like Freud and Schneidman, those guys, they all were convinced that this is a purely human thing. And I they're authorities, so I bought that. But then I started reading more widely, and that's not true. I mean, it's just simply not the case. It's very common in the social insects, things like bees, termites, ants. So there are multiple species of ants when, for example, the individual ant gets infected with a parasite and therefore is truly a threat to the rest of the colony, it leaves the nest. Doing that, just like with humans ancestrally, doing that is certain death. So it trades certain individual death for the lives of the colony, of ants in the colony. And I knew about those species, but I always thought, well, that's not going to have a whole lot of relevance to humans because they're not mammals. But if there were a mammal that did this, that would be different. And then within the last 15 years or so, I chanced upon literature on this species, this organism called the naked mole rat. And sure enough, they have the same social organization as ants do and as humans do. In other words, they're really interdependent on one another. They have division of labor. They take care of the young in kind of cooperative fashions. It just struck me as amazing that the only species in which purposeful self-sacrifice occurs, in all of those species, that they have the same social structure. That's a really strange coincidence or that's meaningful. And I assumed it was meaningful and pursued it. We have such an incredible luxury of this neurobiology, but it's not perfect. They self-sacrifice, the ants and the mole rats and the shrimp. They do it under conditions of where it really is for the best. Humans, that might have been true a long time ago ancestrally, like hundreds of thousands of years ago kind of thing, but it's not true anymore. Now it's a misfiring. Now it's something that if you do it, if you're trying to save people trouble and cost and emotional pain, this is the last thing that you would do. But this misfiring idea is that people get themselves in mental states to where this seems like a really good thing to do. The most costly thing, the worst idea possible for generations becomes in their mind a good idea. This state of, sort of misery and agony that people are in suicidal crises. I think there may be a quality to the anguish that might be beyond words. And in that state, it feels so painful, and it also feels intolerable, and it feels permanent. And if you put those things together, you can see why people do desperate things.
I think that when I start telling my story, it's super important to know that I was born without really a desire to live. Like a career day at school in elementary. Everybody else, they knew exactly what they wanted to be. Oh, I want to be a vet. Oh, I want to be the president of the United States. Or I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a doctor. And I remember having a lot of envy for them. If you asked me what I wanted to be, I'd just say photographer, because that's what my mom did. And that seemed to be the answer that people were looking for. I got in trouble in school a lot for my grades. I didn't do homework. I never took school seriously because I had it in my head that I was never going to grow up, or I was never going to go to high school. I was never going to go to college, so why do my homework? Why do something that I don't want to do? It's not that I was suicidal growing up, it's just I had no will to live either. When I was younger, I started to act up, and I started to get attention from places that I shouldn't have as a teenager. I loved my family, and I knew that I was going behind their back. I knew that if they found out the things that I was doing, it would break their heart. And I felt so guilty about that, and I started having this self-loathing and hating myself because I didn't care about me, but I cared so much about them. So I think that's that self-hatred and that idea of never having a future just goes, you know what? If this goes bad, oh well, I don't have to be here tomorrow to deal with the consequences. And I idolized suicide long before I ever attempted anything. And then one day I went to school, and I knew that it was going to be my last day of school. I went home, and I went to my siblings, and I tried to give my siblings as much love as I could that night. I tried to savor some of the things that I thought I would miss in life. Once everyone was asleep, I got up and I wrote letters. I wrote a lot of letters to people that I honestly couldn't even tell you their names anymore. I wanted someone else to care about me because I couldn't care enough about myself. I got up, I found some prescription medicine in the cabinet, and I took them like one after another, and then I went to bed. I went to sleep perfectly content that I was never going to wake up. I woke up a couple days later in the hospital. Pretty quickly after I woke up, it was only a couple hours, later, that they were wanting to transfer me to a behavioral health unit. And then once all of the intake was done, I had to say goodbye to my parents. And because I couldn't walk, they brought me a walker. And, I don't even think that it had clicked that, what was going on. It just kind of happened so fast. I woke up, I was transitioned here. I don't think it had set in. But walking down this hallway was the hardest thing I have ever done in my entire life. Anytime I ever go through anything hard, I think about that hallway and I think about walking down it, and I remember that anger starting to set in, that, why am I still here? Why do I have to do this? I was so angry at myself in that moment because I was here because I was unsuccessful. And I think that was the first time that I realized that I was still going to have to live life. And that hallway was my first challenge of living. When I was 19, my family moved to Miami, Florida. I decided to go with them. I came to Miami looking for that fresh start, but I feel like I carried so many of my demons with me. I met my husband. We had a kid together. And I felt like I was doing all the things that you were supposed to do. Everything that they wanted you to do, and yet I was still so scared of myself. Because holding my son, he was everything to me. I couldn't imagine a world where he had to grow up without a mom. I couldn't imagine leaving my husband. And I knew that if I didn't do something about it, that I wasn't going to be here to watch my son grow up, and I wasn't going to be able to grow old with my husband. I saw that there was an ad on Facebook for the Miami Marathon. There's no award for washing dishes or doing laundry, so I'm gonna go get a medal for doing something really hard. I remember at mile 23 crying to my husband saying, "This is not fun. This is the worst thing I have ever done. Why did I do this to myself?" There was a woman that was volunteering for the race that had the sponge of icy cold water, and she wrung it out on the back of my neck, and it was so cold and such a shock to my system that I stopped crying. I stood up, and I just remember running as fast as I could with my limping leg to the finish line. I have spent so many years hating myself. That was the first time I had ever been proud of myself, that I set a goal and stuck with it, and I crossed the finish line and I got a medal, and my mom was there and my husband was there. I think one of the big things for healing is being able to look forward to something. Goals, dreams, desires. I like a challenge. What's that challenge for you? What gets you out of bed? What motivates you? What makes you grow as a human? I think that really does heal the soul. That's what got me into Spartan racing. The environment, people were so supportive and people cheering and chanting all at once. That energy was so incredible. when you fail a challenge, you don't give up. You don't quit. You take your penalty. You do the punishment, and then you keep going. You don't have to give up. You don't have to quit. You deal with the consequences, and you move on.
I don't really know when it was that I started thinking about mental health or even making it a topic in my own mind or in my life, because as far back as I can remember, I've experienced things that I knew at some level weren't right. I think I was probably about 6 or 7 years old when I started to get molested by a man in our neighborhood. This was a mentally handicapped man in our neighborhood who would take me beneath a crawl space of our house, where I would spend hours, like literally in the dirt, in this small space, while I could hear my family above me moving around and talking and their footsteps and everything. So that was significant to me. That significantly damaged mental health and my wellness and my outlook and perspective of the world. But there was always, even in that, there was always this place in me that said, this is not right. I know it's not right. And I know I don't want to feel this way. And I used to write to myself when I was a kid. I used to write these notes to myself. This is how it feels, literally. I would write these notes to myself. You have to remember how this feels. At 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, I would write, never forget how this feels. Because someday I'm going to be your dad. Someday I'm going to be able to influence someone else. And I want to make sure I'm doing that in the right way. And I'm doing that the best I can. It wasn't until I was about 15 years old where obsessive compulsive disorder had completely taken me over. And I was hospitalized for the first time at 15 years old for my obsessive compulsive disorder and thoughts of suicide, because I wanted it to end so badly. I wanted to make myself well so badly, or just get out of the situation altogether. For someone who doesn't have obsessive compulsive disorder, anything they do, any action they take, has a result. So you reach for a doorknob, you walk through the door, and you're on the other side. You reached for it, you turned it, you have an action and you have a result. For me, with obsessive compulsive disorder, every action I did had a consequence. If I reached for the doorknob, I put my right hand forward. My right hand is a dominant hand. Domination is bad. So if I were to grab the doorknob, then there's a dominant figure on the other side, and if I were to cross that threshold, then something horrible is going to happen to me. So I can't touch the door. I have to go with my left hand. But if I walk backwards, now I'm reversing things. I'm taking away because I'm walking backwards to switch my position. And I pull my hand back, and only 4 fingers touched my palm when I pulled my hand back. And all this is happening at 1,000 miles an hour, and every single thing I did had a negative, fearful consequence with it. I couldn't do anything except write. When I was writing, when I was expressing my thoughts, not writing schoolwork, not writing a story, not writing problems, when I was expressing myself through writing, it was completely off limits to my OCD. In those moments, I was free. And I would sit and write lyrics and songs, because music to me at that time, especially music, was absolutely everything. And I would listen to these bands and these words, and I would just analyze what they're saying and how they're saying it, and be like, man, they know exactly how I feel, and I can't say it, but they can say it for me. And I wanted to do that for other people. I wanted to be that person. I have the moments before my attempt leading up to it. I was On disability, Social Security disability, I was collecting $400 a month. That would be easy for me to say that was a very low point because of those things. But the reality is, when it comes down to how we feel and how we think and how we experience life, what is around us and what we have for material and possessions and what we're surrounded by means absolutely nothing. When you're in that moment of thinking whether or not you actually want to live, how much money you have to your name becomes completely irrelevant. If I were to have any advice for anybody who's in a suicidal state of mind, I can promise you it doesn't get worse than that. It doesn't. There's nothing left. That is the bottom of human experience. It might feel worse. It might feel like it gets bad because you're staying there a long time, or you're making an effort to get out and you're not getting out, and you're aiming for those changes and you're not getting those changes, but it's not getting worse. You just feel like it is. From there, we have absolute pure heart, pure passion, pure determination to make significant changes in our lives rather than ending our life. And I think anyone who's experienced thoughts of suicide, man, we are soldiers in the human experience. We're explorers in everything that makes us human beings. And if we can go to the bottom like that and figure out why we're there and how we're getting ourselves out of it, and come back with that information for other people, to help them not get down that low, and if they do, how to find their own way out, man, that makes us invaluable. I can't imagine getting to a place again where I sincerely consider ending my life when I know that I have that level of determination, and if I were to focus it right, I could help change the world. The suicide prevention community has put a lot of effort into promoting hope. Literally the word hope, right? I mean, it's in everything we do, and it should be. It's in titles of our conferences, it's on our shirts, it's in banners, it's on stickers, and we push it on people. And as someone who sits on the other side of that sometimes, I look at it and I'm like, yeah, you're telling me to hope, but you're not teaching me how. At least not enough. I don't know what it means to feel something. You can't tell somebody to just feel something. So I think as a suicide prevention community, it's very important that we keep that hope and we keep promoting that, and that continues to be our campaign. But we also start working in how do we actually teach hope, not just sharing stories and exemplifying it and hoping that people adopt it and embrace it and do something with it, but literally talk about it. What are the steps we take to experience hope, to feel hope within ourselves in our darkest moments? I was in elementary school, somewhere between 3rd and 5th grade, because I remember the part of the schoolyard we were allowed to play in. And I would keep myself away from the other kids because I got bullied brutally because this guy who was molesting me had also tried it with a bunch of other kids in the neighborhood who he wasn't successful at it. But they knew it was happening to me, despite the fact that none of the adults did, or teachers or my family or anything. And they used that against me to bully me. So I was bullied really bad. I would go to school and just hope and pray and think the whole way through my day, please don't let anybody bring it up. Please don't let them single me out today. Don't let them see me. So in these early years, I remember going out in the schoolyard and finding this nook in our school. There was a big brick building, and there was this probably like 12 foot by 12 foot section of the building that was just sort of an inlet. And I would sit on the ground and I would lean my back against the wall in frustration, sometimes crying, like I just wanted to like stretch my muscles and make fists, and I would just lean against this wall and push. And at some point, and I don't remember when, it wasn't like a moment, it wasn't an epiphany, but I remember at some point along the way through those years of doing it, I started to notice that if I look up and I look at the ridge line of the school, I can see the clouds moving against the contrast of the wall not moving. And if I let my eyes adjust and I let my mind think of it a little differently, I would start to see the clouds stay still and the wall actually move. And I remember going out to recess. I remember looking forward to going out to recess so I could go to that spot, be by myself and I would push on the wall instead of leaning my back against it in frustration. I would push on this wall with this imagination as I looked up and was like, the clouds are staying still and I'm moving this wall. I'm the one pushing it, and I would make myself see it that way. That was really the first time I remember learning what it meant to hope. When we talk about suicide and depression and everything, that lack of control is so destructive. So that was one of the first times I remember.
The states of anguish are hard to conceive of, but I don't think you need to fully conceive of them, and I don't think you need to actually experience these states of anguish to have some empathy for them. It's just whatever your worst moment has been in your life. We've all been in dark places. Whatever that is, multiply that by 10 or 100 or 1,000, and that's what we're talking about. It's not too hard to empathize with that. In that understanding, then it's not that hard to conceive of it getting so bad that someone will get desperate. I think everybody can take that away and empathize. And then also absorb the idea that small improvements, they feel like the world to somebody in that state of misery. And the news about that for everybody, all of society, people who don't care about this topic and people who have been immersed in it for decades, everybody in between. The news is that small human acts of caring and connection and purpose, things that come naturally to most of us anyway, are integral in suicide prevention. We just need to get that message out a little bit deeper and further so that we do a better job, because we're not doing that great a job right now in suicide prevention. Neither are we doing that bad a job. But what's indisputable is that we've got a ways to go in terms of doing better, and I think we're on our way.
So the day I got disability discharged from the Marine Corps, I had sent my guitar, a couple of boxes of stuff back to my parents. It was just me, my motorcycle, a backpack, and I took off. That's not really the end of my healing, because I wasn't healed. The truth of the matter is I had an angel on one shoulder and I had a devil on the other shoulder. The devil was telling me, ride off into some magnificent place out west. I remember that was my vision. Go to this magnificent place where no one's going to find you. Put a bullet in your head. The other part of me was saying, just ride until you got a reason to live. So I take off on my bike, and as I'm taking off, I go through Bloomington, say goodbye to some people I'd met there, and I see this girl that we'd become friends. And I tell her what I'm doing, and she says, well, that's funny. She said, I was going to take the semester off to go to Colorado to see some family. And I look at her and I go, well, you know what? You should come with me. We'll have more fun. And she says, okay, I'll do it. You know, the funny thing is, when I look back at my life and I got to do a lot of cool stuff, that is number one. Just being free, figuring out who you are, falling in love with somebody. That trip was the beginning of what today is almost 22 years of marriage, coming up pretty soon from now. 9 kids. Yeah, you heard that right. And we are a tribe. Let me tell you, we are not just a family, we are a tribe. I'm talking to people recovering from addiction, if I'm talking to people in law enforcement, other first responders, veterans, I'll say, you know what, it's not just me who's here. Because every morning, my wife gets the kids and they pray for the good that we want to come out of this. And I know they are doing that. And then when I come home and I tell them the people that I met and the stories I was told, they're part of it. There's much part of it is me. Couldn't do it otherwise. Couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. You know, people ask me, you know, the Air Force psychiatrist when I was at Wilford Hall, what was it that she did that helped you begin to heal? I hear it a lot. She taught me that who I was not just Marine. I had this label I gave myself. I'm tough. I'm the toughest guy in the room. That illusion got shattered, and then I felt like I was left with nothing. And now my only label was broken. And she showed me that didn't have to be my label. It began with talking about that little boy who liked to write in a diary. A couple of nights after we had that conversation, I still wasn't well. I'm in a coffee shop and I started to have this hallucination. Now, one of my triggers, a trigger is just a bad memory that seared in your brain. And for years, one of my triggers was the weather, because my crash was when it was like hot and stormy outside and whatnot. And so for years after, the right humidity, right heat, you know, right clouds in the sky, I feel myself getting anxious and nervous. So I'm in this coffee shop and I start feeling that way. And all of a sudden, it was like the storm's breaking out in front of me. And in that moment, I think to myself, okay, what do I do? Well, I could do what I would normally do, which is go back to my room and get the gun I kept and put it to my head. Or, what would that little boy do? What would that little boy that, you know, me and the doctor had talked about? He'd write something, wouldn't he? So I asked the waitress for something to write with. I grabbed a napkin and I said this poem almost as quickly as I'm gonna say it to you. Took a storm to crack the mortar, the stone the aged clay, the walls I'd built to shield myself from rains I feared to face. Took a storm to clear the rubble, the remnants of my home, to find the lost foundation poured before I dwelt alone. And today, I think I'll swim. I think I'll swim. I think I'll live. I don't want to die. And it meant living.
I never imagined myself to be a family man. I never even imagined myself to be 45 years old. I thought 27 was my limit. I don't know what that is and why it stays with me, but ever since I was a little kid, 27 was that number, and I don't know what it meant or why, but I never saw myself beyond 27 years old. So here I am at 45, and I'm married with 2 little girls. 9 and 11 years old, and God, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. It's nuts to me how much they care about me. And I mean, if you look around my house, there's these little plaques that my wife will buy and replace every once in a while that just says, "You are loved." You know, all of a sudden she'll notice that I'm kind of overwhelmed and I might be going in a tough state, and then all of a sudden there's this plaque on the wall that wasn't there yesterday that just says, "You are loved." And that's my family.
I was always tired. You heard me say, you know, I'm tired. But now I'm determined when I die, I'm not gonna die tired. I'm gonna die empty.
If you want to help a loved one, if you want to help a friend, if you want to help someone in your community, you got to help them build a life.
I can, yeah, I go to that dark place, but I don't stay there. Before this, for 30 years, I lived in that dark place. I was the mayor of that dark place. I opened up stock. We had houses. You know, I had businesses in that dark place. I was never supposed to live in there. We're supposed to go through the dark places. You know, when they say the light at the end of the tunnel, the light is not an illusion, the tunnel is.
It is going to be hard. Life is going to be hard, but you know what? You're pretty darn tough. And you can do hard things, and you can go through hard things.
The way I choose to see it is compassion. I learned empathy. I learned what it's like. I know how bad it hurts. The way I write about it in the book is that compassion is to see the hurt in the eyes of another no matter how badly we are hurt ourselves. If I had to go through that level of experience to give me the level of compassion and empathy that I feel for other people, then that experience is no longer destructive. It's worth it to me. I learned, I gained, I made it mine. I own it.
Anyone can be broken, but this is the most important thing. Anyone can live. Anyone can find hope.
I hope you found this presentation as moving and hopeful and uplifting as I did. I don't get tired of watching it. That's my third time. As soon as I get finished, you'll have resources on your screen. You can help Welcoming Wellness and our presentations and the things we do by following us on Facebook and Instagram, and also inviting your friends to follow us. Please like and share our post. If you need to contact us, our website is welcomingwellnessnc.com. And we're always looking for committee members, by the way. So if you have a time, talent, or just an interest in this particular issue, please contact us through the website, and we would love to talk to you. As we close out today's session, please think about what you've heard and what you've seen and how you can help. Thank you for attending, and good afternoon.